Okay, so for our video tutorial today, we are going to make a stretchy elastic hairband. And what you're going to need is the following. You're going to need one piece of elastic that is 5.5 inches long, and it can be any width really, up to about an inch, well, maybe 3/4 of an inch. This elastic here is just shy of half an inch, probably about 1 centimetre elastic, but you need 5.5 inches length. And then you're going to need some fabric, which is going to be the elastic casing, and you're going to have 2 bits of fabric here, and that fabric is going to be 27.5 centimetres by 4.5 centimetres. So 2 of those. And then the fabric that is actually going to make the hairband piece itself, that piece of fabric is 39.5 centimetres by 8 centimetres. So 39.5 by 8 centimetres, and you're going to need 2 pieces of that fabric. Now, in order to get the shape for the hairband, what we're going to do is we're going to fold one of the hairband pieces of fabric in half, and I've put a crease into this piece of fabric, and we're going to measure in 1.5 centimetres from the edge at the raw edges, so 1.5 in from that side and 1.5 in from that side. And then I'm just going to use a ruler and a cutter, but you could draw a line on with scissors and a fabric marker, draw a line on with a fabric marker and use scissors, and we're just going to cut from that 1.5 all the way up to the top. So we're going to cut up there like that, and we're going to cut down here like that. And that gives you the shaping for the hairband, and you need to do that on both pieces. Okay, so to make a headband, which we can later add the buttons onto, which is really helpful at the moment for NHS workers, we are going to take 2 pieces of fabric, which will be the bit that you see going around the front of the head, 2 bits of fabric which are going to be the elastic casing for going around the back underneath the hairline, and then a piece of elastic. Now, I've chosen to make mine out of 4 completely different fabrics, but you can make yours out of whatever fabrics you've got to hand, and they could even be patchworked if you wanted as well. So the very first thing that we need to do is to put our pieces right sides together so that we can sew them. So I'm just going to open out this piece here, the blue piece, and I'm going to have my purple piece that's going to go down on top. But before I pop that down on top, I'm actually going to add a safety pin, and I'm going to pop that in one end, and this is going to help me for turning through when I've stitched it together. So that's a safety pin placed at one end. It's clearly in from the edges, so it shouldn't get involved or in the way when we're sewing, and that is going to be placed on top, right sides together. And then I'm going to repeat that process for the other fabric. So again, lay one of them out right side up, find a safety pin, pop it in the end. Ideally, you want the head of the safety pin to be facing the end of the project, not into the body of the work. Let's just see if I did that one the right way. I did that one the other way. The reason being is that then the end that you're pushing through the work is the end that doesn't open, and it just makes it slightly easier. So right side up, and then we're going to paste this piece down on top, right side down, and then I'm going to stitch down the long edges on each piece. So 2 long edges on that piece and 2 long edges on this piece, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. So I've now sewn down the long edges of both of my pieces of matching fabrics. I've just used the edge of my pressifer as the seam allowance, so about 1/4 of an inch, not too much at all. And this is where the clever bit with the safety pins comes in, because I've now got a safety pin in the end of here. And what I'm going to do to turn this through is I'm just going to push that safety pin up and pull the end over, just like you would do normally. And it will start to turn in on itself. and it just makes it really easy. So quite often if I'm turning through straps for a, I don't know, a vest top, or if I'm turning through bag handles or anything basically where I'm looking to turn the fabric through, that's my trick that I use for turning through. I'm just going to pull that right off the end. There we go. So that took no time at all. So I'm just going to pop that one down, and I'll do the same on this one. So my safety pin's in here. I'm just pushing it on as you would if you were threading anything through, and then I'm just taking the end over. This one's slightly easier because it's bigger, so it just gets pulled in on itself. Do try and use a bigger safety pin if you can, depends on the size of your project really, but a bigger safety pin does help. And then once it's exposed at the end, like that, you can just give it a really good pull. So I've now pulled these through, turned them through the right way. What I'm going to do now is just give the seams a bit of a roll so that my seam's coming right out to the edge, like that. And I'll do that all the way along, and then I will give them a press. So that's rolling the seams out to the edge and then giving them a nice press with the iron. Okay, so I've been to the ironing board and I've now pressed through the top part of my headband and the bottom part as well. And a good trick is if you've got something that's sort of sharp but also blunt, a bit like this knitting needle, then as you're ironing, just push that right into the seam so that it pushes out as you've got the iron going, and it just means that you get a nice crisp edge. Now, my piece of elastic is narrower than my elastic casing, so just to make sure that it stays kind of where I want it to be in the middle, I'm just going to go to the machine now and do a line of stitching just in from the edge, and a line of stitching just in from the edge on that side as well, and it's just going to narrow the channel down for my elastic. This turn through is about a 1 1/4 inch, and my elastic is much smaller than that. It's probably a 1 centimetre elastic, I would have thought. So yeah, I'm just going to do 2 lines of stitching down the sides just to make the space of my elastic that little bit narrower, and then I'll show you the next step. So I've top stitched down my elastic casing, a little bit wonky as you can see. On that side you can hardly see it at all. And I'm now going to thread my elastic through. So this is 5.5 inches of elastic, approximate length, and I'm just going to thread that safety pin down inside the casing. So always a bit of a wiggle to get it started, and then I'm pushing it down inside. Now, before it disappears from this end completely, I'm just going to pull it a little bit further, pull it back out. I'm just going to take that to the sewing machine and stitch across the end, just 1/4 inch in from the end of the fabric to hold that elastic nice and in place for me. And I will go backwards and forwards across that elastic about 5 times to make sure that it's nice and securely held, and I'll try to make sure that it's in the centre of that channel as well. So there we go, I've done about 5 or 6 rows of stitching over that elastic. It did slip slightly, as you can see, when I started sewing because I didn't bother pinning it. So you might want to pop a pin in just to make sure that it stays in place. And then my safety pin is just here, so I'm just going to continue pushing that through the channel, sliding the fabric down as I go. Like so, and again, by having the end that you're going to be pushing as this end of the safety pin rather than that end of the safety pin, I find that it works better and that you have less instances of that safety pin coming open. So I'm now just going to take the safety pin off, and I'm just going to push that elastic back in, and I will put a pin in it this time just in case I let go, like so. And I'm going to do exactly the same at this end. I'm going to go across it about 5 or 6 times. Okay, so my elastic's all prepared. What I now need to do is to take the hairband piece of the fabric and just turn the ends in. So I've done it at this end and I popped a pin in, and I'm just going to show you how to do it at this end. And the easiest way I find, although I'm making it look a little bit fiddly, is just to take that side and just pinch a bit over in that thumb, pinch a bit over with that thumb, and then just push your finger down inside and hold it tight. And there you go, your ends are pressed in. And then when you've done that, either give it a really good finger press, rubbing your nails along it if you've got them, just to press those edges in, or you can go back to the ironing board. Just be really careful that you don't hurt yourself with the iron, because it's really close and small. So we're really close to finishing now. We've got the ends tucked in, and what we're going to be doing now is sliding our elastic into that opening. So actually you can see there that I've messed up a little bit, and actually my fabric is only just caught. So when I push this in, I'm going to have to make really sure that I make sure I've come down the elastic enough to catch that fabric properly. So I've got a choice. I can either put pink and purple together, or purple and blue, and then I would have pink and red, or blue and blue. I think I'm going to go with blue and blue, and pink and purple, or red, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to open that up, I'm going to take that, and then I'm just going to slide this in here, making sure that it's all nicely positioned. So I made loads of these for Neve when she was young. They're super easy, and you really don't need a lot of fabric. So unpin that end, and then you're just going to tuck that inside like so, and then pop the pin back in so it's not going to go anywhere. And again, when you're stitching this end, these two bits in place, just make really sure that you do a good couple of lines of stitching across there. I'm going to just trim that end off so that it's nicely held. So a couple of lines stitching across there, couple of lines of stitching across there, and at the same time I'm now going to carry that stitching on, and I'm just going to top stitch all the way around the hairband. So I'll stitch across here, travel down this side of the hairband, get to the other end, stitch across, and then travel back down the other side of the hairband. So the hairband itself is now actually top stitched at the seam edges as well. And then I'll bring it back. So if you're making these headbands for fun, that headband is now complete. We have stitched across the join, and then we've gone all the way around, just keeping that fabric, and basically that just stops it from folding and switching, you know, the seam rolling around. You could, of course, if you prefer the more scrunched look at the top of your headband, you could make this slightly wider at the top. As long as it comes into the same sort of size at the bottom, it's not a problem, and then you'd have a bit of fabric a bit more scrunched up going around the top of your head. Now, if you're making these for those in the front line, because at the time of recording this, it is April 2020 and we're amidst the coronavirus outbreak, then nurses and frontline staff who are wearing masks all the time some of them are really suffering with getting sore ears where the elastic is going around the back of their ears and they're really not used to it. So make them a mask like this, and then place a button about 3 inches up. So there's what that's the baseline where my casing is joining my my elastic is joining my headband. 1, 2, 3. So I'm coming up about 3 inches, and you would sew the button on there. Just going to get a piece of needle and thread and just sew that button on, and then do one on the other side as well. Use a decent sized button, so that button's about 1 inch. You could go a bit smaller, but don't go really small because they've got to get the elastic to trap behind it quite easily. They have to take the masks on and off a lot. Don't worry about matching buttons. To be honest, they'll just be grateful that they've got a headband with the buttons on. So if you've got odd buttons, make a bit of a play of that and have fun with that. Just think about whether you actually want to put buttons on the inside though, because similarly that might actually cause them a little bit of discomfort as well. So if you are putting the buttons on, just put them on one side of the headband. And that's my quick and easy tutorial for a headband. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please do share pictures with me. Thanks very much. Bye.